Hi, thank you for coming. We'll just jump right in. And I wanted to start by saying this is really not meant to be an interview. It's meant to be a conversation. So you guys should jump in whenever you want, and you can ask each other questions. And there's really no particular structure to this, right? But maybe start by, so in writing, which is what I do, there's something called voice, where you know, especially as you get a little bit older as a writer, you really hope that you have a distinctive voice and that maybe people could read the things you write and say, oh, Peggy wrote that, just recognizing it without even reading the byline. And I wondered, when in baking, this is probably a long-winded way of asking you to each describe your styles as a baker, what you feel your voice as a baker is.
Well, I think that my voice has changed. I think that I have been interested in bread for many reasons. I first became interested in bread because I owned a restaurant, and it was one of the things that we made in the restaurant. So I think that initially was this chance to provide somebody with the very first bite of a meal. I think now I'm more interested in being part of a long lineage of bakers. So I'm not a particularly innovative baker, but I love the tradition of bread. And I would say what's most important to my baking voice now is probably using the grains that are grown in Maine and really finding a way to work with sometimes less cooperative flours and grains.
I just think where I am today is just an accumulation of what I was doing at the time, unplanned, improvised, and working in a restaurant, you're asked to do a bunch of different things, and I was just doing that every day, and then I got here, and just very unplanned. But like Barak, I get very inspired by the nature of Maine. I didn't plan to be a baker. I was just very inspired by what Haberfish had or Greengrocer had. That's how I got interested in food. So, so Maine inspires me.
I want to come back to that, the question of inspiration in Maine, but when you say unplanned, meaning unplanned to be a baker, or even sort of the style of the things that you bake?
Both. Yeah. I got very lucky to have a job at a 4th Street restaurant and standard baking where people do very classy things with classic methods. And if I did get a job anywhere else, at like Norms or something, then I would probably be a very different cook. I was just doing what I was supposed to be doing.
And just to expand on that, so Barak, your food is like your big brand. You really do feel the lineage. It feels very classical and sort of very simple and rustic. And if I had to, and you can tell me I've got this all wrong, but if I had to describe your baked, the things that you bake, Atsuko, I might say incredible, very imaginative, very creative, somehow trying to get Western traditions and Japanese traditions to speak to each other. So in some ways I'm thinking that the two of you have really quite different styles, but am I making that up, or do you think you do? Sorry, are these...
Bringing the Japanese flavor was was pretty easy for me. And also, I think I was working in a restaurant when Asian food was becoming popular, so it was more well accepted than I thought. And also, when I started Tetenpie, it sold well. so I think I was doing that more forcefully just to break even.
And do you, sort of the question that Barak was saying, that feeling very interested in the history of baking and the lineage, when you're baking, do you think about that, or do you think about...
I got very interesting baking, the science of it.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So tell me, since you are maybe developing, you're saying it's easy for you to put in Asian flavors, when you're developing a focaccia with seaweed, or walk me through that. Do you just have a dream one night? Oh, focaccia, seaweed, or...
I usually have this, the flavor I want to achieve. And it's usually just kind of winding road. I try this and it doesn't work, I try that. And then someday, somehow it happens. But I do have a vision, not the vision, but the flavor of maybe from the past, something I tasted before.
Yeah.
So I kind of have that image, and I try different things, put different flavor. That's how usually I work.
And how do you know when you're there?
I do know.
Like, how do you know, okay, this is it?
Yeah,
How?
I do know
You just-
how.
yeah.
It tastes good. And, I mean, I'm usually not very satisfied with my food. So when I like it, I do like it.
Okay. And I just have to give an aside here. I once did a story where it was just when people were beginning to cook with seaweed a lot here. And so I decided, a cookbook came out from Barton Seaver, a cookbook with seaweed, every single dish, including chocolate cake and all kinds of things you wouldn't expect to find seaweed in. So I decided I would host a dinner and invite a bunch of people and then not tell them what was in anything and see what they thought. But I did invite Atsuko-san, and she took one bite of the very first thing I served. I don't remember what it was, but it was not miso soup. It was not something you expect seaweed in.
Lasagna.
And she, what was it? Lasagna. That's what it was. It was lasagna. And she instantly said, seaweed? Good palate. And I wanted to ask you, again, sort of on the lines of tradition, am I right that you baked your bread in a wood-fired oven for several decades?
I did for 22 years in the previous iteration of ZUbakery, which was in a barn in South Freeport. And I would say that this is like a reoccurring, sort of getting to the question you were asking about tradition. I would say that I have this reoccurring habit of putting myself in a situation that I'm totally unfamiliar with. And then figuring out how to kind of dig my way out. And that was true with the wood-fired oven. I had never baked in a wood-fired oven, and they're incredibly challenging. There's so many variables that impact temperature and the nature of the heat. And it took me, a year and a half to figure out how to fire it consistently. And so I've done that over and over again with different implements of baking. They're never things that I've invented. I now do a lot of fermentation in wooden troughs instead of plastic bins. I've seen beautiful old posters of these dough troughs, and I wanted to be around more wood and less plastic and to see what it was like to ferment dough in wood. So I built them, and then I had to figure out how to use them. And so even though these things have been done for centuries, there is still a process that I go through that is, it's a bit dizzying at the beginning.
And this may be a silly question, but it is wine at all, in the sense that the flavor, any of the flavors of the wooden trowel would come through?
No, hopefully not. I mean, you choose a neutral wood, like, I mean, maple is a wood that is relatively low in tannin, so it doesn't impart a flavor the way that oak would for wine. But what you do get is you get this biofilm on the surface of the wood, and that biofilm aren't beneficial yeast and bacteria. They're the components of the starter. So if I were to put in flour and water, a dough with no yeast or no fermentation into the trough, in a few hours it would be an active dough.
And do you miss baking in the wood fire? You don't, I was watching you bake.
So this is the wooden trough.
Yes.
Yes.
But I wondered if you missed when you left the wood fire, if you were glad to get rid of it, if it's finicky, or if you really missed it.
It was I mean, there's cutting wood and splitting wood and stacking wood and firing an oven. All of that just to get to the point that you have an oven that's hot. Now I have these, they're called knobs.
Amazing. Modern society is just...
Love them.
Tell a little bit, because you're not only using local grains, but you're actually milling your own flour?
Yes, so I mill all the flour. The rye and spelt come from Aroostook County, and the wheat comes from Brunswick. And hopefully Seth is here somewhere. I really can't see anyone, but Seth of Crystal Spring Farm, Seth Kroc.
Oh yeah,
is,
I worked with him at Wall Street.
Oh, that's right. So he's growing all the wheat. Yeah.
And how much does that change the flavor of the bread?
I think that comparing flavors of grains is very hard because I don't do a lot of side-by-side comparisons. I'm using just his wheat, and it's hard for me to kind of remember what like the Aroostook County hard red wheat was like. I certainly like the way that mixing this wheat and fermenting this wheat is different. Yeah.
And Atsuko, are you using, I know you're using a lot of local fruits, and every time I especially love going to the bakery in the summer because it's rhubarb and apricots and just figs and all sorts of lovely fruits. Are you also using local grains? And tell me about the fruits and where they come from. And
Grains, not so much.
Yeah.
Just the buckwheat from Maine, and all the other flours, that's from Vermont, King Arthur.
Yeah.
But fruits, I grow some, and I try to go to farmers market. And there are a lot of fruits that we cannot get, apricots. But yeah, a lot of fruits are from Maine.
Weren't you growing, or were you growing peaches? Peaches or apricots?
I grow peaches.
Peaches, okay.
And plums, which I make more pickles than umeboshi.
Of course.
Than
Baked goods.
baking, yeah. Lots of rhubarb, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries. Yeah.
And if we were having this discussion, say in, I don't know, Omaha, Nebraska, would you be different bakers? Is it mostly the ingredients, or is there some way that Maine feels like it really informs what you do? It's a question for both of you, so.
Probably. I wonder if I was interested in food. I was very interested in ocean first. So I don't know how I would get into cooking in Midwest, the landlord. But I think it will have an influence, for sure.
Yeah. And Barak?
It's hard. I've never been there to.
I was just using Omaha as an example.
I mean, you can't. I can't overstate how important MOFGA has been, the Maine Grain Alliance, the Maine Grains in Skowhegan, the farmers market scene here. Like, everything supports everything else in Maine, and what all of those organizations do is create a very interesting customer base. So I had customers showing up in the rain to buy my bread at the farmers market, and I think it's all part of one big ecosystem of hungry people and great farming. I mean, really, the farming in Maine is incredible. And, you know, I'm old enough to remember when there weren't winter farmers markets, and then suddenly, like, well, there was like spinach in December, and then next year there was spinach in January, and pretty soon they sort of developed these hoop houses and other kinds of growing structures that they could grow year round. Yeah, it's amazing.
I absolutely agree with that, because my first job was at 4th Street restaurant, where Sam Hay would bring all the farmers to the kitchen, and cooks, they don't really plan on, you know, make orders based on the menu that they want to cook. The farmers comes first, and then it's up to you how to deal with the produce. So I think that's very good. Paved my way, I think, the way of thinking too. And I still can't make a solid menu until now. So I don't have a concrete menu, and I think that's Sam's fault.
Is he here? I wondered, you know, speaking of sense of place, Atsuko, you grew up in a place that, at least as far as I know, doesn't really have a baking culture.
Oh, no, I think Japan has so many good bakeries.
And was that true when you were, I mean, I can see that being true today when it's, you know, it's a very international place, and, but was that true when you were growing up?
Yeah, there was a lots of pastry shops, maybe not like voluntarily, like hard bread place, but yeah, you throw a rock and then pastry shop.
And were they
Or anywhere.
I mean, but there's not a tradition of Japanese, I assume that would be baking another...
We don't, yeah, right, the tradition, like we don't bake with steam. Yeah.
So baking French pastries or...
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot, I mean, you see more authentic, I think, more authentic French pastries in Tokyo than in France. Or a better Italian restaurant than in something. But I'm biased.
And I also want to put Barak on the spot about his background, because I just learned last week that he grew up in a town where my sister lives in Tennessee, and I haven't been there in a while, so maybe I'm wrong on this, but the last time I was there, I was basically 90% fast food. So I wondered, in your childhood, like, was there much good, were one of your parents a good baker? Were there many good baked things or breads that you were eating?
There was not a good bakery in Tennessee. There was a restaurant that made incredible buttermilk biscuits. Really, really, like, to this day, the best that I've ever had. And so that was really special. But I think I was exposed to baking because I got to travel a lot throughout my childhood. And so I lived in Germany and traveled in other places where there's, you know, incredible bread culture. Yeah, so that's where I really realized how good bread was.
And I'm wondering a little bit about equipment. So we were talking a little bit about the wood-fired oven and the exciting new technology of knobs. I know James Beard once said that the best equipment that any cook has is his hands. Is that true? Is there some piece of equipment that is the most important one and you take to a desert island, or a piece of equipment you really covet in your kitchens? Me. Whoever wants to go.
I love fire. Are you? I love fire. I feel like all the bakers are a little bit fire.
Thank you, guys.
I love fire.
Wait, forestry.
Yeah. Oh yes. That's how I applied there because it always smelled good.
Anything to add?
I mean, I think that I wouldn't want to really lose any of the tools that I have. All you have to do is injure a finger or lose power, and suddenly you realize what a loss you're at without that equipment. But I do, as is true kind of across the board with the bakery, I try and keep things very simple. So there's really no extraneous equipment. I try not to rely on, one of the reasons that I do ambient fermentation for all the doughs, which means at room temperature, as opposed to a lot of bakeries for very good reasons will mix their bread doughs the day before, ferment them to some stage, and then put them in a cooler or a retarder, which is what the machine is called, which keeps the dough at a cool temperature. It ferments, but it ferments very slowly. I totally get that idea. It certainly is more convenient for a baker's schedule because you now come into bread that's ready to go in the oven. The downside is when that equipment breaks, and it's very expensive equipment to begin with, but when it breaks, you discover that in sort of the worst possible way, which is you open the door and everything is over fermented. So I like to rely on very low tech technology as much as I can.
And switching subjects entirely, but influences. I wondered if there were cookbooks or social media or bakers that feel really significant, either to your development or even today, that feel as though they really influence what you do.
There is one book that I got it when I studied and I still read. Yeah, that's from Japan.
So we're not going to know it.
No.
And are you going to translate that for American bakers, or?
Well, Japanese cookbooks are in general a little different from American cookbooks. I think American cookbooks tends to have little stories about childhood and grandma's kitchen story.
Right.
The Japanese cookbook tends to have teeny tiny pictures of all the processes. So I always go back to that and then just check where my, cake batter is at, and as a reference.
And is it a baking book?
It's a baking book.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of Japanese the food writers I did read. They got very inspired.
And Barak, you said something to me the other day which I just loved, which is you said, I think you were talking about what you might tell a young baker, and you said, form a relationship with the book.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
I really feel like I'm so lucky in hindsight that I evolved as a baker as bread books were evolving. So when I first started, there was Beard on Bread and Tassahara Bakery. And that was a real fork in the road. Are you a hippie or are you, Francophile? And I was more of a Francophile, I think. So I read the James Beard book. I read them both, but I liked the Beard on Bread. And then, every time a new bread book came out, I knew about it right away and I would buy it. So I felt like my world of information was very manageable. And so that's what I'm saying to you, that I feel like the amount of information available in all of the incredible bread books that are out now, and then added to that all the kind of online stuff is to me overwhelming, and actually I think kind of a hindrance to learning, because you just are constantly switching gears, switching paths. And I think what I was saying to you about forming a relationship with a book is like finding a path that allows you to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, because you're staying on a sort of single path. But I also go back to it's really nice to go back to those early books, and it's kind of a nice way to kind of self-correct, because you've sort of forgotten the techniques that you knew well in some ways, because your habits kind of change, and then you look at the books again, you're like, oh right, this is actually how to do that.
Yeah. This is probably the question I'm guessing many people in the audience are wondering, which is, how winning the James Beard Award, beyond our experience of it, which was probably waiting in very long lines last summer, whether that has changed your life and how?
It didn't change my life, but it changed everyone else. I still came home and went back to, back to work. Maybe more, for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone else changed.
I'm trying to remember when Martha Stewart showed up at Norimoto. Was that before the award, after the award?
Before.
It was before, okay.
That was shocking.
And Barak, do you feel like it?
I feel like I went through so many stages. Getting nominated was a total shock. Winning, of course, was a huge shock, and very emotional for me after spending so many years on my feet working in the food world, and then coming back from Chicago on a Tuesday, prepping on Wednesday, opening the door on Thursday, and just being swamped. And then I would say there was like that summer, or last summer, it was only last summer, but I think that was honestly, it was quite stressful. It was very rewarding, of course, and it's, when you own a small business, to kind of know that you're going to be busy is an incredible security. But the amount of pressure that I felt, having people's expectations so elevated beyond what I had ever claimed. I had never, ever claimed to be the best bakery. It's absurd. It's absurd. Okay, but so now, like, people aren't just coming for a tasty treat, they're coming for that. And by the end of the summer, I think, my crew at the time really rose to the occasion, and I feel like now I have I hope my crew is here, Sam and Olivia are somewhere. Anyway, they're awesome. They have come to the bakery with a lot less baking experience, but with like this great heart and soul, and now it's like teaching time, and that's a great gift.
Yeah. No, have you decided who will play you in the movie?
Fred Armisen for me.
Oh my God! I hope he is watching this live stream. It could be the Portlandia set. Are you well known in Japan because of this award? Did that change what it's like? I know you've just come back from a trip there.
I am no. Thank God.
And has it given you, either of you, opportunities and ones that you want to, open a bakery in Manhattan or have a TikTok show, or write a cookbook.
I never want a second location.
Okay. The same?
Yeah, I got so many emails shortly afterwards they seemed completely spamish though, but it was a lot of like franchise funders and that kind of stuff, and I have no interest in that, but it was very weird for a moment to...
And not, TikTok fame or going on Celebrity Baker or writing a cookbook. No?
Which might be fun.
Yeah.
Might be good too. Work on.
Yeah. And you were a writer before you were a baker. So. Which sort of brings me to the question of neighborhood bakeries, because both of you have bakeries that are so much a part, even for all the tourists lining up last summer, so much a part of their neighbor. You're really in neighborhoods, and they're very small bakeries. And I just wondered about your relationship with whether that just happened to be where you could find a good rental space, or whether you feel like you have some particular relationship with where you are.
Oh, yeah. The Deering Center is the best. Bakery,
I live 2 blocks from the bakery, so that's it's my neighborhood, and I love the West End, and the restaurant that I owned was right over here, so I've been feeding people in the West End for a long time, and it's very important to me that the business is rooted in the neighborhood. That's really
And I wondered, is running a business, I think a lot of Americans who are hobby bakers, including me, probably have a fantasy of running a lovely little bakery and serving everybody blueberry muffins and having neighborhood dogs. But these are actual businesses with a lot of pressures of rent and labor and rising food. You don't need me to tell you. And I just wondered, just the running a business part of it, did that interest you, or was it really the baking? And in which case, how have you found the running the business end?
Well, I studied Norimoto because Tendenpie suddenly closed, and I had a lot of wholesale businesses that time, and there were coffee shops, and they all wanted pastry. They didn't want me to stop baking. So the business part of Norimoto kind of started as just a matter of necessity.
When I know you had a partner at Tendenpie.
Yeah.
Was he doing the business end, and you?
Yeah.
So it's really pretty recent that you.
Yeah. So I just found a kitchen, and then I was doing just the wholesale for coffee shops, and then it just kept evolving, and I found a nice small spot in Deering Center. And then it just made more sense to do retail. So sometimes I step back and think, maybe I shouldn't have started all this. But I think the hardest part of doing a business is to step back and then find more interesting, the more motivation, be able to step back and then, feel like baking something new. Just feeling fresh, because by the end of the day you're so tired and you don't want to bake anymore. Now there are every day in the summer.
Yeah.
So it's both very hard to you really have to work hard to find more motivation. as a baker.
Yeah. And Barak,
I am not like a spreadsheet kind of. I love business no matter what the business is, but I've come to accept that if I want to have a bakery, I have to run a business. And I think in a way, I've said this, I actually was saying this to Sam and Olivia not long ago, but like, because I'm not a spreadsheet person, I don't dwell on the price of butter. So when butter fluctuates, and I use very good butter, and because I don't look at those numbers, I don't ever stop using very good butter. And I think like those sorts of decisions would be much more tempting to me if I was more of a business owner who happened to bake. So I feel like in a way that's an advantage of being a reluctant business owner.
And something that I was talking with, I think it was Sam, who works with you, and he said one of the things he really admired about you was your work-life balance. So I'd like to hear about that from both of you, particularly because you're closed on Sundays, which I think maybe, especially for a neighborhood bakery, but people think is the traditional day that they would go and get their Danish and bring it home and have a leisurely Sunday breakfast, or hopefully reading the Press Herald. But sort of also, you're open somewhat limited hours, and sort of how you made decisions about when to be open and trying to achieve some kind of work-life balance, particularly because I assume you are both getting up very early in the morning to run a bakery. For instance, was it hard to decide I'm not going to open on Sunday?
Well, that was nice of Sam to say. I don't agree with him that I found a good work. I mean, that's something I'm trying to do, and as I get older, that balance changes also. My kind of physical recovery takes longer, and so when you were asking, like, do I want to write a book? I would love to sit down and write a book. That sounds really nice. I don't know if that'll happen, but at some point, like, I won't be able to keep this pace going. But finding that balance is hard. I don't know that it's a moving target in a way, I suppose.
Anything you want to add?
Well, I'm a little bit workaholic. So I mean, you worked in Japan, so.
Yeah. When I worked in Japan, I don't know if this is still the case, there was a 6-day work week.
Yeah, I did that. Maybe 10 to 16 hours a day sometimes. So when I came to the States and started to work at 4th Street, one server came to me and said, "Oh, it must be so stressful to be in such a stressful kitchen coming from Japan." And I said, "No, it is charming." Working in the kitchen, working with beautiful produce, it's very, very charming. But when I had my daughter, then I started to think about life and work balance, and also I started to garden quite a bit, so I had to come home and tend to garden. But that really helped me to unwind and also be inspired. So I think you need, whether that's work and family life, or work and garden, or some play, or you have to juggle, and in a very healthy way.
Yeah. It is a very physical job. I'm just thinking about what you said, Barak.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, certainly you hear more maybe about the restaurant business, but it has to be true of the bakery business. It's a young person's job.
Oh, I always tell them, my staff, some people think chefs are like rock stars or something. No, we are like athletes.
Right.
You have to be physically fit.
Yeah. I don't know what time it is, so I don't know how many more questions I can ask. Can someone tell me what time it is?
Quarter of.
20 minutes to 8? Okay, because you guys get to ask questions soon. I'm wondering, you both also, I was asking about neighborhood bakery, but you also both have pretty small spaces. And whether, again, was that sort of an accident, or did you really want it very, I almost felt like I was I know you studied ship building at some point, or I felt like I was in a little galley. Like it felt like a very small, cozy space, and whether that was intentional or whether you wish you could have a wonderful, giant kitchen.
Well, when I found the space, I thought it was big enough.
But not now.
Not now.
And just because you're making more than you
Just making
expected?
more, yeah. And I kept adding more fridge and
Right.
tools, tables,
Yeah.
and some people too.
Yeah.
No, it was big enough first.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that like things expanding to fill the refrigerator? Kind of thing?
Yeah.
Excuse me. And
I think I really wanted to be in the West End, and so that decision meant that there were very few commercial spaces to choose from. And then factoring the cost of rent, in a way, it's, the business model that I have created is one that's really based on a small space with a relatively affordable rent. And so it would be a different business in a bigger space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
both of you are not exactly, you Barak, seem a little more self-taught. You were taught in kitchens to some extent, but if a young person came to you and said, I really love your bakeries, I want to be a baker, is culinary school a good idea? Would you tell them just get in a kitchen and work there? When I started to work at 4th Street, I asked Sam if I should go to culinary school, and he said don't. He said, well, don't, unless you want a 60,000 in debt a year. Right. That's what he told me. So I probably say the same thing if someone asks me. Yeah. And
I feel that I didn't go to culinary school, so I can't really speak to that, but my intuition is the same. There are bakeries. My bakery is so small; it's very hard to add a person like a stage or apprenticeship, an apprentice. But there are bakeries like my bakery that are a little bigger that can encompass a new person for a few months, and I think that's a great way to start. To go with an open heart and a willingness to work really hard, and what that means when you first go to a bakery is like stacking bags of flour and splitting wood maybe and mopping and like very physically demanding basic tasks, but to surround yourself with an environment of bakers and baking as a way of starting.
yeah. Do you, at the end of the day, when you're at the end of it, do you want to eat your baked goods, or are you just so tired of seeing them? I eat a lot of rice balls. No rice balls in ZUbakery.
Probably not as many, but I do. I love eating. I mean, the pastries, I kind of, I don't eat pastries every day, but bread, I probably eat a plate of bread almost every day. I still love bread. I really do. I love fresh loaf of bread dipped in olive oil. It still is just like such a perfect.
And this is sort of a lovely segue to the question I wanted to ask to end before we open it up to audience questions. But this actually came from an audience member. Some of you sent in questions earlier. And I love this question because it just feels like a sort of difficult time in the world right now. And this feels like such a lovely question, which is what parts of your daily routine bring you the greatest joy? So I'm thinking just eating bread dipped in olive oil could be one answer, but
Part of the day at work or
they didn't specify. You can do one of each or
attending garden.
yeah.
For sure.
And is your garden mostly vegetables and sort of an orchard, or is it
More orchard than veggie.
Yeah. And also flowers, or really orchard?
Flowers, some,
Yeah.
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 But my garden is new now. So I moved a year and a half ago. So yeah, it's still in progress. Well,
Yeah.
garden is always in progress.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is off topic, but was it hard to leave a garden you'd worked hard on?
It was very hard. Yeah, it was. But I transplanted all the tree peonies, which meant so much to me. So I transplanted, most of what I wanted to bring, but of course not the big trees, like apple trees and pear trees, quince, I really miss.
And these fruits all show up in in the pastries, or
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So they're used.
They have to.
Yeah. And Ross, what part of your day brings you joy?
I'm going to turn that question around and say that what I've come to realize is that even though I don't have like a structured kind of spiritual practice, I've come to really appreciate that my job has a real kind of ritualistic meter to it. And I don't know that, I love pulling bread out of the oven. I find that part is still quite magical in a way. But I think what I have come to appreciate, really value, is that I recognize all the stages of my day. There's, each part of that is something I've done so many times, and having that entire kind of routine is really, I find very comforting.
Can we open it up to audience questions? And I just want to remind everybody to make sure you use the mic so that everybody can hear you.
If you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll bring it over to you.
So obviously, first of all, thank you both so much. This has just been a wonderful conversation. I'm very inspired by, obviously, you immerse yourself in your baking and your craft. To what degree do you enjoy the more outward-facing part of your job, which I presume is like the interface between people that are coming into the bakeries and that you're, not necessarily farmers markets anymore, but to what degree does that sort of fuel you versus just sort of like the baking and creation process?
I don't know if I understand.
I think that like it's such an essential part of what I do. There are times when I'm tired and it's hard to be, a jovial server person, so to say, but I think like historically bakers and butchers and those have been the people that are sort of the center of community conversations. Not that they are the center, but that place is the center for that. And it can be things that we think of as small talk, the weather, or whatever, but I really consider a lot of the customers that I have, and some of them who come to the bakery now came to my restaurant in 1995. Like, that's crazy. But I consider them friends, and I look forward to seeing them. And we know some customers get the same thing each time. I think but so that's a little. But I do think it serves a really important kind of anchor to a kind of more communal way of living. I think it's really important that everyone feels welcome at the bakery. One of the reasons I don't do any politics, I want everyone to feel as welcome as they can.
We have a question back here.
I'll preface my, go ahead.
Atsuko, did you want to say anything to that, or you're...
I just want to say my customers are really great people. I never had any difficult people who gave me trouble. And I've been very, very lucky since the 10-10 days. They could still come to Deering Center, even if they're out in South Portland or Monterey Hill. I've been very, very lucky. But Portland is like that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to stop whoever.
No, I'll preface my question by saying that I was in the resort hotel business for many years, including a resort that's about 10 miles from the Culinary Institute of America. And in the kitchen, the other departments, like the garde manger department and the hot side, always referred to the bakery and the pastry department as the chemists, because it was the chemists. And if there are any STEM people in the audience here or at home, do you guys consider baking the most scientific of the culinary fields? And how often do you think about the science behind making what you do?
I think that's the first obsession I got in baking, the science of it, and then because there was science, I felt like I can learn it. If it was, because I wasn't trained cook, I had some hesitation going into the kitchen. But because there was science in the baking, and I felt like, I can read that, I can study that, and it is very adaptable. It relates to the environment that you work in, humidity, temperature, and everything, even like your body temp, your smell, and so that was a very nice entrance for me to get into baking, I think. I don't know if I answered the question.
I think there are bakers I know who are much more scientific than I am. I tend to work intuitively, but precisely. I mean, I'm always paying it. Like Atsuko said, temperature is, for any of you home bakers who are trying to bake, temperature is extremely important. Don't worry about hydration. Hydration is all the talk, but temperature is really the thing. But when I look at high-end pastries that restaurants are doing, that to me is a whole nother level of kind of precision and science and kind of a level of fussiness that I'm not really into. Not that science has to be fussy. My parents are going to kill me.
Well, I certainly appreciate that both of you use great butter in your baking. But I want to return back to the James Beard honor. And I really would like to know how it has changed you interpersonally, or intrapersonally. Not so much as your baking, but your relationship to baking. Not outwardly as in economically, but how has it, if it has, changed you? are impacted your life as a baker
The
and your relationship to baking.
award,
He has been honored with the James Beard Award.
okay, once I was half joking, but I told, so I was nominated 3 years ago, and then so 3 consecutive years, and then third time, a lot of people got very excited, and that really gave me a lot of pressure. And half jokingly, I told my staff that, well, whether I win or I don't, it's gonna be all downhill because people's expectation will be so high. And you know, if I win, people come and I say, oh, this is not what I expected. Or, and I don't win, oh yeah, of course you didn't win. So it's a lot of pressure. To be in that position. And I was actually talking to Barak about this year's nomination on a lot of people in Portland. And we just so glad we don't have to be nominated anymore. Best thing about winning, I think. And now I think about it, you know, it gives you pressure, especially in the summer, that you have to make something that people expect, or more than that. But then, after the summer, I started to think, no, I shouldn't try to bake something that people expect me to bake. I should always, you know, go back to the garden and then next day bake what I wanted to bake or what I was inspired. So it took a little bit. I mean, the last summer was such a mess, and but yeah, before holidays, I started to think that no, I should just forget about that and then keep bringing myself to be inspired in where I was inspired first, which is the nature and the ocean and nature of Maine.
I thank you, Myron. I don't know where you are. Thanks for that.
I don't know.
Can't see anymore. So the first thing, was really more profound for me than I realized, was just one. It was incredible to know that my kids were proud of me. That was just huge. And then the other thing is
My kid is not.
She's proud of me. The other thing is, like, imposter syndrome is a real thing, and it really does. Well, I'm also very much a workaholic and very much, you know, I always see the things that I've done wrong. I don't mean to turn this into a therapy session. I just mean, like, as a baker, like, I know when something doesn't come out quite right, I know, you know, I'm investigating that question. And so just to have the recognition has allowed me to kind of ease up on that kind of internal dialogue a little bit. And one of the things that I still make mistakes all the time, and one of the things I really like to do when I have made a mistake with the baking is to say that out loud to Sam and Olivia and point out what I've done and, like, all right, tomorrow, you know, I'm going to do this. Because everything's always changing, the grains are changing, the temperature in the bakery is changing, so you're always adjusting anyway. But I feel like, to your question, Myron, I just feel like it's giving me confidence to enjoy that, to enjoy the stage of baking in a way that's really amazing, honestly.
Maybe Maine Voices live therapy sessions. Try that. Yeah, it's so fun. I just want to thank you both very, very much.
Thank you so much.
I like to bake, so I was very excited when we planned this, and it's
Yeah.
just been a joy to talk to you.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
And thank you.